The Diary of a Home Care Worker by Rita Nemo with Julian Hutchings. Introduction by Julian Hutchings. For many years I was the director responsible for managing a home care agency. Our company delivered thousands of hours of care every week to vulnerable people in their own homes, to clients who were mainly but not exclusively elderly. The vast majority of the care we delivered was through contracts that we had with local authorities, and at one point we contracted with over 25 local councils. Our company had a number of different offices throughout London and the South East, and we employed about 1,000 care workers. For much of the time we provided a good service, but occasionally things went wrong and our service was not as good as it should have been. Unfortunately, delivering home care is an art and not a science. Our company was successful for a number of years, but we ceased operating a couple of years ago for a range of reasons, some of which are explored in this diary. Shortly before our business closed, I was passed a large envelope. It had not come through the mail. Someone left it in reception and asked that it be handed to me. When I opened the envelope, I found that it contained a diary written by someone called Rita, a care worker who was clearly working for our company. I did not know Rita, and she had not and has not made herself known to me. Reading her diary, I made some deductions about who she was, but I have not made my suspicions known. She clearly wishes to remain anonymous, and I respect her for that. Rita is not very complimentary about home care agencies, and some of her criticisms are clearly directed at our business. But I think they are valid and fair, and I've not changed them. However, I have changed the names, including hers. So Rita, if you're out there, and I know you are, this is for you. The overwhelming majority of care workers employed by my company and throughout the industry were and are wonderful people who performed and continue to perform an exceedingly difficult job in unbelievably difficult circumstances, often for very little reward and very little appreciation. Without them, the people we supported would unquestionably have had a worse quality of life. Rita asked that this book be dedicated to the care workers, wherever they are employed, as without them the lives of vulnerable people would be immeasurably worse. What follows is Rita's diary in its entirety. Monday. Dear Diary, isn't that how all diaries start? I know mine did when I was 11, and I kept it going for 4 years, and I wrote in it most days. That had some secrets, I can tell you. It included the passion I had for Bobby Newbury when I was 12. No, nothing happened. And that thing I had, or almost had, with Kev Grimes when I was 14. Yes, something did happen. But that's a different diary, and I don't know what happened to it. I might look for it later. Maybe it's in the loft. I wonder what happened to Kev. My name is Rita, and I'm a care worker. I have different names. Some people call me a carer or a home carer. Maud at number 9 calls me her girl. Nancy at number 15 just calls me you. Some clients call me darling or sweetheart. Richard, that's my son, he calls me mum sometimes. And Tim, he's my husband, or used to be. He used to call me Reet, but now he never calls me anything because he hardly ever calls. I've been doing this job for 12 years now. I've always worked for the same company. It's an agency, but I won't tell you the name in case someone reads this and I get into trouble. It's a big one, though. They have a lot of offices, and I expect they make a lot of money, although I don't see very much of it. Sometimes I get paid £10.20 per hour, £5.10 for half an hour, and £2.55 for a quarter of an hour. And sometimes I get £9.60, £4.80, and £2.40. The reason it varies is I work on one contract that pays the London living wage, and sometimes I work on a contract that doesn't. The London living wage is supposed to be sufficient to allow you to live in London, and I suppose it's true in a way. After all, I do live in London, and I'm getting by. Just. I'm one of the just about managing that you hear about. I get paid by the hour. Actually, that's not quite true. If I do an hour, I get paid for an hour. But if I do half an hour, I get paid for half an hour. And if I do a quarter of an hour, I do quite a lot of those, I get paid for a quarter of an hour. So you could say I get paid by the quarter hour. Actually, that's not true either. I really get paid by the minute. If I do 14 minutes, I get paid for 14 minutes. And if I do 29 minutes, I get paid for 29 minutes. Who'd invent something like that in this day and age? Who'd pay someone by the minute? I learnt something the other day. The payment is calculated by a computer, and the computer has to be programmed so it knows what to do. If the time that I log is 13 minutes and 29 seconds, I get paid for 13 minutes. But if it's 13 minutes and 31 seconds, I get paid for 14 minutes. So you could say I get paid by the second. Even during the worst times in the cotton mills in the 19th century, I don't think people were paid by the second. My visits are capped. That means if I'm given a 15-minute visit, I won't get paid for 16 minutes if I log out then. I'll only get paid to a maximum of 15. So if I do 11 minutes, I'll get paid for 11 minutes. If I do 11 minutes 29 seconds, I'll get 11. If I do 12:31, I'll get 13. But if I do 15:31, I'll get 15. It's complicated. Like I say, I've been there for 12 years, but I only found this out a few months ago. They don't really tell you stuff like that. They do give you training though. I know how to use a hoist and recognise a pressure saw, and I could clean your bum for you or make you some tea or tidy your bed, and I can clean your teeth for you and give you a bath and put your shoes and socks on for you, and I can hold your hand when you cry and help you with your medication, and I know all about the Mental Capacity Act, and I know how to raise a safeguarding alert, and I can talk to you when your family ignores you. And I know what dementia is, and I can recognise the symptoms of a UTI, urinary tract infection, since you ask. And I know how terrible multiple sclerosis can be, and when to wash my hands regularly with soap and hot water, and how to use a fire blanket. So I've had a lot of training. I didn't used to be paid by the second. I used to be paid for an hour, or half an hour, or quarter of an hour. It was called planned time. So the agency gave you those times to do, and you got a timesheet from the service user, and that's what you got paid. Sometimes you stayed a bit longer because they needed you, and sometimes you left a bit earlier because they didn't need you. But it all evened out in the end, and everyone was happy, except the big bosses and the councils who introduced electronic monitoring. Computer says no. Now, on most of the contracts I work on, my pay is calculated according to the times that I log in and out. When I get to the service user's home, I have to use their telephone to dial a number, and that records the time I arrive, and then when I leave I call again, and that records the time I finish, and that's how I now get paid, by the second. When I say service user, I mean the person I'm helping. Sometimes they're called clients or customers, or I call them Mrs. Smith or Mrs. Brown, if that's their name, obviously, or Maud or Nancy or Albert, if they want me to call them by their first name, which many do. The agency did start calling them person we support for some reason, probably invented by some social worker. So we don't have a service user guide anymore, we have a person we support guide, which I think is silly, to be honest, and so do the service users or clients or customers or people we support, but nobody asks my opinion, so I keep it to myself, except here. Anyway, sometimes the phone doesn't work, or someone's using it, or the service user, I'm going to stick to that, doesn't have a phone, or they have a mobile, and then I have to get a timesheet signed. I write down the times that I worked, but I round it up a bit, and I don't put the seconds in. I don't think that's cheating, do you? Well, maybe just a little bit. But I do think it's a bit unfair if I get to someone's house at 9 a.m, because it can take them time to answer the door. And then I like to say hello and everything before making my phone call. So I don't log in until 9:06 or 9:07 or 9:10 sometimes. But I don't get paid for that time, which I don't think is very fair. I don't have set hours of work, and I don't have a salary. I work when I work, and I don't work when I don't work. And I get paid when I work, and I don't get paid when I don't work. I think it's called a 0 hours contract. And I've seen a lot of people like Justin Welby going off on the news that it's bad. But really, I don't mind. Like I say, I've been working here for 12 years, and I do much the same hours every week, so I don't mind really. People say it's hard to get a mortgage and stuff when you work on a 0 hours contract, But a house where I live is over 500,000 quid, so I can't see me getting a mortgage any time soon. I do quite a lot of 15-minute visits, although not as many as I used to. There was a big scandal about the number of them that companies were doing, so now it's reduced. But there's still plenty around. I hate them, and the service users mostly don't like them, but what can you do? I don't decide. The agency doesn't decide either. It's the council and the social workers. They decide on the visits. You can't do much in 15 minutes, although I do my best. Sometimes I think the service users tell the social workers they're more capable than they really are, because they're proud and don't like having the help. And I don't think the social workers realise how long it takes to boil a kettle or make a sandwich or have a wee, and that people have good days and bad days. On a good day, the visit might take 15 minutes, but on a bad day, it takes 20 minutes, but I only get paid for 15. And I can't leave after 15 minutes if the service user is sitting on a commode, can I? The social workers aren't bad people, I'm sure, and I don't think the council is either. I mean, they do their best, like we all do. But it's all budgets and cost and austerity and tightening our belts, and there's only a limited amount of money and so many people who need help, and the elastic is stretched really thin, and one day it'll snap and hit someone in the face, and that's really going to hurt. But it does seem as if my belt and the service users' belts are pulled a bit tighter than the fat cats in the government. Tuesday. I know what you're thinking. She's a home carer. She's not very bright. She's only doing this because she can't do anything else. I bet she doesn't have any O-levels. Nope. I'm not a genius. I didn't go to university. I'm not in Mensa, that weird organisation for people who think they're smarter than everyone else. I'm not excessively bright, but I don't go thinking I'm stupid because I'm a home carer. Actually, I have 8 O-levels and I got 2 A-levels, and I could have gone to college if I'd wanted to, which I did for a while, but, you know, things happen. And I met this boy, and one thing led to another, and we ended up getting married. It didn't last. I grew up faster than he did, and we drifted apart after a few years. But I'd missed the boat with college and that. I started doing different jobs: shop work, clerical work, cleaning, bit of nannying, usual stuff. And then I started working in a care home, and I loved it. The old people so gentle and sad, but they needed me, and they responded and smiled when I came around. But that closed down after a couple of years. They never told me why, and so I started doing home care with the agency, and I'm still here. And then Tim came along, and then Richard. It's what happens, isn't it? We fall into stuff, and it can be hard to climb out because the walls are slippery, and we can't get a foothold, and plus maybe we don't want to climb out, and we're happy. I'm happy, sort of. Oh, I meant to leave and get a better job, a job where I'd get a bit of respect from society, like be a teacher or a journalist or an estate agent. Joke. But I never did, and now it seems like I'm stuck here, at least until Richard is older and doesn't drain my money so much. Thursday. They, that's the agency, send me a rota every week. I wish they'd send it on a Wednesday so I could make plans, but usually it's on a Thursday, and quite often it's Friday, and sometimes it's Saturday or even Sunday. That's annoying when that happens, but the agency doesn't operate for my benefit. They say they operate for the benefit of the service user, but they don't really. It's for them. I'm lucky because my rota doesn't change all that much. For about 3 months I've had a steady round, so I see much the same people at much the same times, so that's nice. Last week they were short of staff, so I did extra visits, which was nice because I needed the money. Richard needed new shoes, and my phone's been playing up. You use your phone a lot in this job to phone the office and stuff, and I have to pay for the calls, which annoys me as well. Did I say I'm not well off? I thought Richard's dad, that's Tim, might pay for his shoes, but that was never really going to happen. Let's be honest, most men are useless. Anyway, sometimes I work Saturday and Sunday. It's the same money. It didn't used to be. You used to get more for working at the weekend, but then they said it was a 7-day service and the council didn't pay any extra for Saturday or Sunday, so there was no extra money anymore for us. Which I thought was wrong, if I'm honest, but what do I know? The junior doctors were up in arms about being offered a flat rate for working at weekends, and they got a lot of support, but I don't remember anyone gave a toss about my money being cut down. No one cares about carers. We work at the weekend and in the evenings putting people to bed, and at night too, But the agency doesn't. They just have someone on call to deal with emergencies. I never really understood that. It's a 24-hour service, but they work 9 to 5, while the rest of us are working all hours. I mean, that's not fair, is it? If you're a service user and you need help getting out of bed, then you need that help 7 days a week, don't you? Mind you, they're trying to do that with the health service, turn it into a 7-day service, aren't they? But if it's a 7-day service, surely everyone has to work 7 days. There's no point in the doctors working 7 days if you can't find a porter to wheel the patient down to theatre. And they'll struggle to discharge more patients at the weekend when there's such a shortage of care workers to take on the extra work. But the big thing that annoys me is travel time, or more specifically, not being paid for it. I said that I get paid by the minute, so if I have a visit that is supposed to start at 10 for 15 minutes, and the next visit starts at 10:30 for 15 minutes, and the next visit starts at 11, and so on, then I've worked from 10 to 11, i.e. 1 hour, but I've only been paid for 30 minutes, and I've earned £5.10p or £4.80 for that hour. Now you can see why I'm not well off. Now, granted, sometimes the service users live next door to each other, or they're in an extra care scheme or sheltered housing, and travel time is virtually non-existent, but that doesn't happen very often. I asked the agency about it once, and they said they used an average travel time of 5 minutes between visits. I asked them whose average was that, because it wasn't mine, and they said it was an average they used, and it was worked out by the computer. I bet that computer has never been a care worker. I read somewhere that this is a breach of minimum wage regulations, and I need to look into that. The agency said that they comply with minimum wage rules, but they would say that, wouldn't they? If only there was a union. Tuesday. I'm not bad looking, even if I say so myself. Not as good as I was in my younger years. I used to be quite a looker, what men used to call all right, or even sometimes bit of an all right, and some even said tasty, and some still do. Tim used to say I was tasty, but not now he's met Sally, the cow. I'm quite tall and I've long legs and a good figure. I haven't let myself go like a lot of people you see. And my face is still quite nice, I think. My hair is dark and I don't dye it very often, and I've brown eyes and my skin is still okay. I sound like I'm describing myself for an advert, and maybe I am, and I have. GSOH. Men sometimes look at me in the street. They don't stare, don't get me wrong, no one crashes their car when they see me, but they turn their heads or their eyes swivel as they drive past, and I like that, I won't deny it. I'm 38, in age, not in boobs, well, in boobs too actually. I read somewhere that 38 is a woman's sexual peak. Well, I better get going then or miss out. Actually, I'm 41. I'm not 38. Why would I lie about that to you, diary? I mean, I know I lie to other people, men mostly, but I ought to tell the truth to you. Oh well, I'm 38 in boobs though. That bit is true. I've been mostly alone since Tim ran off. I say mostly, as there's been a couple of blokes, but they didn't last long. I think I'm choosier now. Being a mum does that to you, and also you don't want to get hurt. But I don't want to stay single forever. I do hope I'll meet someone someday, well, soon, really. There was a time after Tim left, for a year or so, when I wanted him back and hoped that he would come back, even after everything, what he did to me. But that's past now, and even if he wanted to come back, I wouldn't have him. You learn to manage on your own, don't you? I mean, you have to. I don't have a choice. And of course I've got Richard to look after. I hope he doesn't end up like his dad. I mean, in the sense of acting like a shit to women. I'd hate that. But what can you do? I do my best for him and try and instill good values in him. It's hard to know if it's working, to be honest. He's 13 and he notices girls now. Of course he does. And the stuff I've seen on his phone, God, it's different from my day, that's all I can say. We were driving along the other day. I think we were going to Bluewater or somewhere. It must have been a Saturday, and we stopped at the traffic lights and this girl walked past. She was about 15 or 16 and she was gorgeous, even if I say so myself. And Richard just stared and stared, his tongue hanging out, and I started laughing at him, and he got all funny about it and sulked all the way home. Anyway, back to me. The best thing about me is my boobs. Is that the right word? I don't want to say tits, that sounds a bit crude. And breasts is just so impersonal, and knockers is just two carry-on films. And rack, they say that in American programmes, but that just sounds weird to me. I could try melons, but they're nicer than that, so boobs it is then. They're in proportion. Does that explain it? And they're not totally reliant on support. Not totally, that is. Not like some, you see. But I don't want to sound all bitchy, that's not fair. I don't go around with them hanging out, mind you. Not like that cow Sally, flaunting herself all over town and shoving them down people's throats every chance she gets. No, not like that. Sorry, being bitchy again. Why am I apologising to you, diary? That doesn't make sense, does it? Anyway, as I said, I don't flaunt them, but people can see them, if you know what I mean, under whatever I'm wearing. Sometimes I wear a tight shirt or a sweater deliberately so it gives the bloke something to look at. Cheers them up. And they look nice. I know. The boobs, I mean. People tell me. Service users tell me, is what I mean. Well, this service user told me anyway. It's late now, so I'll describe it tomorrow after I've had some kip. It's been a long day. Wednesday. As I was saying, I also have nice legs, and sometimes I wear a skirt or a dress. And if the sun is shining and I stand in front of a window, you can see through it and see my legs. Why shouldn't I? But I don't do it for me. Well, I do sometimes. But mostly I do it for the service users, the men anyway. It's not a crime, is it? Is it? This is going on a bit, but I wanted to tell the story and give all the background so you'll understand, diary. It was a lovely day yesterday. Bright and sunny and warm. One of those days you get in late spring when the hint of summer is in the air and everyone seems a bit happier, fresh and clean and new. I felt good, at least. I went to see Bill in the morning. He has an hour-long visit as he's bedbound and needs a hoist to be moved. And that takes two of us. Usually I work with Sam, my mate Sam, who's a woman, despite her name. Only Sam was feeling poorly, so the agency sent me Sharon, who I've not met before. Sharon's a big girl, nothing wrong with that, but she's quite slow and quite loud and quite a pain, really. But she knows her stuff, which helps. We transferred Bill, the both of us, in his hoist and gave him a wash and changed his bedclothes and put him back to bed. I was wearing my skirt, it's a sort of apricot colour, and I was standing in front of the window and the sunlight was shining through. And I turned around and Bill was lying there, and he was staring at me, just staring. And it made me feel a bit uncomfortable, but also sort of warm, if you know what I mean. He's 81, and he can't do much, except look. Can't do anything but look, really. So I stood there for a bit, and I looked at him, and he looked, and looked some more. Sharon was on the other side of the bed, and she looked too, and she said, "Wow," and then said to Bill, "Ain't you the lucky one then?" And he smiled, which he can do, and said, "Yep," and looked again. "You have a nice figure," he said. "It's curvy. I like curvy. I probably shouldn't say that, but what the hell? I'm not going to live forever, and what can they do to me?" "Thank you," I said. "That's nice of you to say so, and I don't mind at all." Bill said, "Can I get a picture?" "What sort of picture?" I said. "The two of us," said Bill, "on the bed. You could give me a little cuddle and Sharon could take a picture." "What about a picture of you and Sharon?" I said, and I knew I was being mean. "Don't you want one with Sharon too?" And Bill said, "Sure, if that's okay." "We're not supposed to," I said. "It's against the rules." "Where's the harm?" said Sharon. "Who's going to know apart from us? And we're not going to tell anyone, are we?" Bill said, "Please, pretty please." And he looked at me and winked. He can still wink. And I thought, well, I know we shouldn't, but where's the harm in giving an old man a little joy in his life? He doesn't have much else to cheer him up. So I sat on the bed and put my arm around Bill's shoulders, and he nuzzled his head against my arms and rested his head on my right boob, and Sharon took the photo on her phone. And then she sat on the bed and put her arm around Bill's shoulders, and he nuzzled his head against her arms, but not as close to her boob as he'd been to mine. And I took the photo on Sharon's phone, and then she sent the two photos to Bill. "I'll delete these from my phone. Better be safe," she said. And then we said goodbye to Bill and wished him well. and I walked past the window once more because he wanted me to. And I gave him a big smile and he said, "See you tomorrow." And then me and Sharon left and she went to her next visit and I went to mine. I never said there was a moral to the story. It's just a story. Isn't that what a diary is for? Thursday. Lots of contracts use electronic monitoring. I may have told you this. When we arrive, we use the client's phone to make a phone call to a system which records our time of arrival. And when we leave, we make another phone call to record our time of departure. The phone only rings at the other end, so the client isn't charged. So no timesheets, no cheating on times, not that I ever did. Easy for the agency. We get paid the correct amount. Social services get charged the correct amount. The client gets recharged by social services for their service contribution. Happiness all around. Agree? Sort of. I won't go into all the possible things that can go wrong. Software not working, phone lines down, client on the phone, carer forgets to call, client doesn't trust the system, client doesn't like carers using their phone because they carry germs, client afraid of Big Brother, George Orwell, not the TV programme which Richard loves, client's family using the phone, loads of reasons. But there's one obvious flaw, which I'm sure you can guess, diary. What happens if the client doesn't have a phone? Didn't think of that, did you? Well, the system has a fallback method to deal with that eventuality, and it's called a code box. Now, a code box is a little black box about half the size of a pack of cigarettes, powered by a battery, which generates a random 8-digit number every 3 minutes. The carer texts that number to the system, which knows where the code box is, assuming someone's updated the system, and therefore records their time of arrival and again departure. Clever, eh? Some questions. Lots of clients, elderly, frail, nervous disposition, scared of burglars, quite rightly, particularly in some, or most parts of London. Paranoid, forgetful, a bit like me really, don't want a funny-looking mysterious black box stuck on their fridge, so they put it in the bin or hide it and then can't remember where they put it. It also requires the carer to use their own phone, which, depending on their tariff, costs them money and is unfair. But there are two other big problems. Because the carer's phone sends a text, this can get delayed because of signal problems, which means that the system can show them as having left before they've arrived, like Doctor Who, or having arrived at the next visit before they're shown as leaving the first. And so obviously the agency and the system and social services assumes that the carer is trying to cheat, because everyone naturally assumes that the carer is trying to cheat. Nobody trusts us, and I hate it. The other big problem is that the code box isn't free, which you could say isn't really my problem, but it is, as I shall try and explain. The code box has to be bought from the system provider, and then there is a monthly usage fee. Social services refuses to pay for it on the basis that it isn't their problem, despite the fact that they're the ones who require the use of the system. The client obviously isn't going to pay for it. They never asked for electronic monitoring, and so the agency has to pay. But if the agency has a lot of clients without phones, that means a lot of boxes and a lot of fees, plus a lot of boxes to keep track of and keep supplied with batteries and swapped if they go wrong and searched for if the client decides to hide them. And that's assuming that the provider has the code boxes available, which they don't always. And all those additional costs means that the agency has even less money to pay us and even less money to make a profit, and may end up in a position where they don't take on extra clients because it just isn't worth it, and then they're in danger of going broke, and so we get less work. Now do you see why it's my problem? Technology. It can save us or it can destroy us, and sometimes it can do both. Friday. In each service user's home there's a document known as a care plan, which provides personal details about the client and information about their needs and the tasks we should undertake for them. Some of the care plans can be quite vague, but some of them are very detailed, and we're only supposed to do, in fact we must only do, what is specified in the care plan. This restricts our opportunity to be flexible and to respond to their changing needs, but can also protect us because we don't do what we shouldn't. For example, if they have a cat or a dog, we should only feed them or clean up after them if it is specified in the care plan. Sometimes I would prefer it if we could talk to them and then use our best judgment about what is best to do on that particular visit. But the system doesn't really allow for that. And if we're only there for 15 minutes, we're pretty restricted in what we have time to do anyway. Funny how social services always know better than us about what people need. But hey, I've only been a care worker for 12 years. What do I know? Tuesday. James has a terminal illness and hopes to die in his own bed, in his own home. He lives in a little flat near the town hall on the ground floor, and he has a hospital bed because he needs it. There's a team of care workers supporting him, and I'm part of that team. Despite his diagnosis and despite the near constant pain he's in, he's such a lovely man, and I look forward to seeing him. I remember when I first started doing this job and I was supporting someone with a terminal illness, and I said to the other care worker I was working with, "Mr. B is dying from a terminal illness." And they said to me, "No, he's living with a terminal illness." It was just a little change, but it made such a big impression on me, and it's one of the reasons I keep doing this job, to make it a little bit easier and a little bit more comfortable for people to live better with a terminal illness. "You know what really gets me?" said James. He was lying on the sofa, a blanket over him, looking tired and drawn and pale, but he always has a smile for me and a friendly greeting. "What's that?" I said, tucking the blanket around him, fluffing up his cushions and taking his cup away to make a fresh cup of tea. When I read about people losing their battle with cancer, or about losing their fight with cancer, or he's fighting cancer, or if it's a child, his brave fight against cancer, it seems to imply that if they'd fought a bit harder, they could have won, like they had a chance or something. And it's only cancer they say that about. You never hear, "He lost his battle with multiple sclerosis," do you? Nobody says, "Poor Margie, she lost her battle with clogged arteries," do they? "Let's all get together and defeat pneumonia." You ever hear that, Rita? And it's not true, Rita. Some people are lucky and they survive, or it's caught in time, or it hasn't reached that final stage. Metastasized, they call it. Or they respond better to treatment. It's nothing to do with how hard they fought. We're not fighting, Rita. We're not beating cancer, none of us. We're just hoping to go on living. I'm not fighting, not really. I'm going from day to day, just keeping on, until the good Lord decides not to keep me on any longer. "You're right, James," I said. "You're so right." It seemed an inadequate response, Diary, but what can you do? You do the best you can. I hope, Diary, that if I ever get an illness like James has, I can face it with his strength, his warmth, his wit, his humanity. Friday. The agency has started a recruitment drive. They say they've got loads of work, but there's a staff shortage and they can't get enough people. That's good for me in a way because it means I get lots of work, but I need a break sometimes. They've been advertising on the internet and they put posters in the window of the office, and they've started a refer a friend scheme, and they're doing presentations in schools. If I refer somebody who does 100 hours of work, I'll get 100 quid. That's not bad. I must tell my friends. Trouble is, most of my friends either work in care already, or they don't want to do it because of what I've told them. So who does that leave? They asked if anyone wanted to volunteer to go into schools and talk to the kids, and I said I'd go. Kids these days don't want to do care work, do they? It's not very sexy, is it? And it's hard work and the money's rubbish, and if something goes wrong, the care worker is the first to get the blame. Plus you have to clean people's bottoms and step over cockroaches and try and get the wee off the sheets, and you get shouted at and abused, criticised and moaned at and blamed. I mean, what's not to like, as they say? But it is rewarding. I hate that word. But you are helping people to have a bit of dignity in later life. And you do have a lot of responsibility and independence, and you're making a real difference to people's lives. I call that job satisfaction, but kids these days, They'd rather get satisfaction from folding jumpers in Topshop or working in a coffee shop or designing an app. I can't see Richard being a care worker, if I'm honest. His ambition at the moment is to have his own YouTube channel and 900,000 Instagram followers. He wants to be a presenter or a product placer, but if he's not careful, he'll just be a watcher. I wish it was better paid, though. I saw that this national living wage is going up. £7.83 an hour for people over 25. It used to be national minimum wage, but they changed the name. That won't do me much good. I might be over 25, but I earn more than £7.83 already, so no pay rise for me. My pay was rubbish for years, but I got a raise last year. All that publicity about home care problems must have helped. The agency is saying that this £7.83 rate is going to be a real problem for them because some of the councils won't give them a price increase to cover it. Differentials, they call it. Somebody in the government should have thought this through. Care agencies supply to local authorities and the prices are set by the contract, so if the pay goes up, the price should go up. But the local authorities say they haven't got any money because their grant has been cut by central government, even though it's central government who say people should be paid more. I think it's a crazy system, but what do I know? I'm only a care worker. I didn't go to Eton. Oh, hang on, that's a boys' school, but you know what I mean. I don't understand the over 25 bit either. Surely companies will try and hire young people because they'll be cheaper, so I'll probably get chucked out and then I'll have to go on benefits. And what will that cost? Me with Richard to support and nothing from his dad? And why 25? Lots of people of 23 or 24 have families to support. Don't they deserve a decent wage? I thought we were supposed to be getting away from age discrimination, but the government seemed keen to introduce it. I think it's mental, but smarter brains than mine have worked on this, so maybe they know the answer. But anyway, the pay rate is only part of it. If you said to me, would I rather have 40 hours a week at $7.73 or 30 hours a week at $7.83, I know what I'd choose. The opportunity to earn. That's all I want. Of course, £15 an hour would be nice, or even $500 or whatever, like Harry Kane gets. But I can't see it happening. If I persuade Harry Kane to get a job in home care, I'll get £100. Maybe I'll try that. Hang on, Harry Kane must get more than £500 a week. Or does Harry Kane get £500 an hour? I must check that. Tuesday. Derek has a colostomy. Funny, isn't it? I used to think that was so funny. I remember when I was at school and we heard about colostomies, it was so funny and we used to joke about it. And then later I read somewhere that Cliff Richard had a colostomy and I used to stare at photos of him or when he was on the telly and try and spot it. But we change as we get older and wiser, or I hope we do, and I hope I have. Derek had diverticulitis. These little pockets developed in the lining of his bowel, and then little bits of poo would get stuck there and get left behind when he went to the toilet, and they'd get infected. He used to be in so much pain, all doubled up he was when I got there, but he used to take some painkillers, Buscopan they were called, and then he would lie down and the pain would go away. Magda, his wife, had passed away a few years before and he was on his own. So many of them are on their own, and I don't see anyone from 1 week to the next, except me, and that's not really enough, although I do my best. Then one day a few months ago, I got there and he was in pain, and while I was there the pain got worse and worse, and in the end he was screaming in agony, saying he couldn't stand it anymore. I called the ambulance and they said they'd send one, and then it didn't arrive for ages and he was shouting, "Why won't anyone help me?" And I said I was doing my best, and I chased the ambulance people again and they said they were really busy and wouldn't be long. Derek was kneeling down with his arms on the sofa because that was the only position which he could get some relief from the pain in his bowels, and he was crying, but there was nothing else I could do. The ambulance arrived eventually, and they put him on a stretcher and took him to the hospital. I said I'd go with him, but he said that was okay, and so I called his brother who lived in Bristol and hardly ever came to visit, and he said he'd come down and see Derek. He was in hospital for 2 weeks, and then he came home with visits from the district nurses, and then the agency called me and put him back on my rota. It turned out that the infection had got really bad and he developed peritonitis and had to have an emergency operation in which they removed part of his bowel and made an opening just to the left of his belly button, and that's where the poo now came out and went into a colostomy bag. I'll describe it for you, diary. because I know you're interested, and everyone should learn about this, and then maybe people, like I was, will stop sniggering when they hear the word colostomy. Derek has a little bag like a handbag which contains his bits. He doesn't know when he's going to go, but when he does, the poo comes out of the hole by his belly button and goes into a little pouch. This pouch sticks to his skin with special adhesive. It's very clever because it sticks, but when you need to remove it, it just peels away. He can change it himself now, but when he first came home from hospital, he was a bit unsure. So the district nurses showed me so that I could help him. In his bag there's a packet of wet wipes to clean the skin, and there are plastic bags like dog poo bags to put everything in when it's done. It's remarkably simple and straightforward when you get used to it. Derek doesn't go out much, but when he does, he takes the little bag with him. He uses the disabled toilet if he's at the shops or somewhere, and says he gets funny looks from people because they think he's not disabled because he's not in a wheelchair. It's amazing how many people think you're only disabled if they can see something wrong with you. They've told him that they may be able to reverse the operation in a few months' time when everything has healed up inside. I hope they do, although he says he's getting used to the colostomy and doesn't mind it now. In fact, he says he quite likes it. That's weird, isn't it? But I don't have one, so I don't know. You've been listening to the first episode of The Diary of a Home Care Worker by Rita Nemo with Julian Hutchings. Tune in next time for more of Rita's Diary. Thank you for listening.